interesting topic. It's good. Everything good? Everything
I feel like I only see you once in a blue moon.
I know, only 4 times a year.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I know.
know.
I know. But
Pretty good. Pretty good. The only thing that's could make you, it's like during the middle of the day, you know,
yeah,
Arbor Day.
that's how almost all of our. But it was nice. They planted 5 trees along.
I saw some pictures of that.
Yeah.
You know, did you ever get the, promoting, like getting a tree, like
We are. So we have something on our website currently, but I'm working on our website. We're going through a redesign, but I'm working on updating that page. The only problem is I don't have access to it. Public Voice has it. So I'm working with them to get what we're doing. But what I did, I'll send it to you guys. I could just draft like a flyer kind of thing.
yeah, simple. Yeah, simple. I feel like they have questions they can ask the public works person, saying like, hey, we do,
Just a simple flyer saying like kind of like the process, but basically also the rain, waiting to like.
right. The reason why we don't, there's not year round.
Yeah, it's getting closer to October, so it starts raining all the time. So people, we don't want to put one down. Like we plan a bunch of stuff. Yeah, but because people will be interested in it, so that's going to draw a lot of attention. Right? So it's another reason.
Oh, that's good. It's not like sleep on that long.
Co-host, so if more people need to join the meeting, you.
Got it. Thank you. I don't want.
They're off the states.
Yeah, right.
Here? Yeah.
Right?
I don't know. The strangest thing are all the biggest crowds. So things that I've like lost a read on it because some of the things that I'm like, I think that people would love this, be interested in those. Soon, so I have a plan for all of that. I'm going to redo that whole wall, and I have it. I just you see how everything is like different. So
Yeah.
how everything.
We're ready, Mayor.
Yeah, but that was
Mayor, we're ready.
so. I'm gonna go black and white too.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't want black and white? No. But I'm gonna do something where.
Mayor,
What I did for-
Mayor,
where I had you picture,
we're ready.
like crop everybody out and just put in like a uniform background, even if it's all just so look they're all different.
Hey, Micah. One, get started. All right, we call this city council workshop to order at 6:11. Call the roll.
Mayor Fahed.
Here.
Vice Mayor Santin.
Here.
Councilman Dion. Councilman Lamas. And Councilman Perez Crespo.
Here. Okay, let's please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you. I know we got some people that are interested. Northwest 36th Street is obviously an important issue that came up a lot. I'm going to just start us off with a very brief timeline to just get us to how we got to this workshop. It starts in August of 2020. That's actually when I first got on the council. It was during the height of COVID, and that was the highest crime along 36th Street. Many of you know that I live on that side of town. At that time, we did. I mean, obviously, it was at the peak of COVID, so it was a bad time. And then a lot of the hotels had to do things to get by. But we did a nuisance abatement ordinance. We put barriers after, as that was winding down, we put barriers on 36th Street between the hotel district and the single family residentials to try to create a barrier between those. In February of 2021, the city created the Business and Economic Development Task Force. It was comprised of local business owners and residents. They worked for over a year. In November 22, the Business and Economic Development Task Force finished their report. And then in February of 2023, very early that spring, they presented their findings at a workshop. During that workshop, one of the findings was they quoted outdated and over-restrictive zoning codes were linked to the lack of investment and development necessary for revitalization of the 36th Street district. That was a finding of the task force, is they felt that that zoning, the zoning codes there were limiting our ability to revitalize that area, particularly as we were moving, getting over COVID. And so then in May 2023, the council sought people with expertise in city planning, in development, and in land use to do an assessment of the Northwest 36th Street District and the Abraham Tract. So we wanted the expertise of people that know so that they could do that. So CGA and Lambert were charged with conducting a market analysis, examining current development trends, and evaluating our existing zoning codes, and then making recommendations to the council for revitalization of these districts. And that's what brings us to this point. So with that, and unless anybody has anything to add, Sylvia, I think that you can go ahead and make your presentation. Thank you.
First of all, Sylvia Vargas, principal planner with CGA and serving.
There.
It is. Yeah. Is it? No?
Yeah.
I don't think I can get it much.
That sounds like it's on. Yeah, it's on. Yeah.
Sylvia Vargas, principal planner with Calvin Giordano and Associates, serving as the city planner. First of all, I want to apologize for being a few minutes late. Ironically, I was stuck on traffic on Northwest 36th Street. So I will give you the whole tour in just a moment. Not that one, but the one that I did before. So if you could go to the next slide. Just kind of going off the scope of work that the mayor just described. Our role, the way that we kind of framed it, was that we are here to help the city re-envision the future of the Northwest 36th Street District and Abraham Tract District, and to evaluate options to promote the enhancement of these areas. So we look at it being not just zoning, but potentially other actions that you may have to take. And we were lucky that we had already as an input when we started the work of your task force. Some of it was already focused on codes. Some of it was focused on other things, and we certainly are taking into consideration as an input for our work. But I think we're going a little bit beyond that. So, before you move on, hang on. Before you move on, the map represents the area that we're working with. You're familiar with these, but I think that my experience in working here in the city for almost 2.5 years is that many people are not even aware that the Abraham Tract is part of the city of Miami Springs. So one of the things that we did when we started this project almost a year ago was trying to figure out how to position this from a project branding perspective so that we could, go out to public and have some kind of identity that could be identifiable. And we think that maybe it's something that the city could pick up and use later. But what we came up with is that little logo that, and actually it wasn't us, it was your own Shannon Dazer that came up with it, which is the Activate Southeast Springs district. So we're thinking this could be its own sort of district for marketing purposes, and for the project, obviously, as well. Go on to the next. So today, what I'm hoping to get out of this workshop with all of you is basically 4 things. We have been working for, again, almost a year, and at some point, it became clear that there was not exactly consensus on which direction to take. And in order for us to move forward to the next stage of this project, we need to get that direction. So that's knowing that there was an election in November. This is why we're here. I'm sorry, not November, in April. But 4 things that we hope to get out of here. One is to get some consensus on the preferred approach to the zoning issues. The second one is to look at certain uses that are allowed in the code, but effectively deterred from other parts, which is what goes to number 4, which is the charter. And then to look at certain development typologies, all of which is connected, obviously. Go on to the next, please. Is it stuck? Yeah. All right. So I mentioned just a moment ago that I was going to give you the tour. Just very quickly, my first impressions of the corridor and the Abraham Tract, as we and myself and my colleagues on my team basically went through it by car and by foot. So if you can go on to the next. One of the most striking things about this corridor is how unfriendly it is to pedestrians. This is a real challenge to anything that we can do. These are just some of the most blatant examples of how unfriendly it is. The sidewalk itself is not necessarily undersized. It's a standard 5-foot sidewalk, but there are so many obstacles on it that there are long stretches where I don't even think that it can meet ADA compliance. And so that's, you can clearly see how, there are a number of hindrances for you to circulate as a pedestrian, whether you are on foot, whether you are on a wheelchair, whether you are a parent that is pushing a stroller. And it happens because you have families that come and stay in these hotels. And so that's an issue. We have a series of decorative light poles in another section, which you can see in the picture here, sort of in the center on the left, that are not even fully covered, which I think are tripping hazards, because if you go, you really could hurt yourself if you hit your toes on those pins. And then here on the bottom, we have the Abraham Tract, which doesn't even have any sidewalks. And so you have a lot of people that are staying there in those hotels. They have to walk on the street if they decide to walk, which is basically taking their lives into their own hands. So that was my most striking, and I think my colleagues as well, my most striking impression of kind of walking this corridor. Go to the next, please. That's okay. Okay. The other thing is that there's an almost absolute lack of visual interest and destinations. There are places to go, but there's no visual interest whatsoever to tell you where you're going. There's no wayfinding. You have a lot of buildings that have turned their back on the street, even though they're older buildings. You have long stretches of wall without any articulation of fenestration or doors. You see it almost along the entire corridor, except, some instances where you have freestanding uses that are, more like fast food restaurants and that kind of thing. But this is a very common condition, and not just on Northwest 36th Street, but also other streets. Can we go to the next? Okay. We have three types, basic types of uses along this corridor. We have commercial, we have office, and we have hotel lodging. Surprisingly, we also have some residential in this corridor right now. And we'll go through some examples of typologies that we have right now. Most of the commercial that we have is, most of it is actually non-conforming to the code that we have. It is older. It is freestanding. It means that it's not part of a building with other uses. And so we have, older uses that can remain there as non-conforming uses, but they cannot be changed. They cannot be expanded. Unless, they get redeveloped. A lot of it, I'm not saying that everything that is on this corridor is bad or marginal, but a lot of it is marginal and it's older. And even if it isn't, even if it's viable, it has an appearance that doesn't really meet the standard of the rest of your city. Go on to the next, please. Okay, these are some of the examples of office uses. It varies widely, but we have some older buildings there as well. Most of them are 2 stories, and they are rented to a multitude of very small enterprises, very small. We went to hand out flyers in some of these buildings, and inside there were a maze. You could barely find anyone because they were like, kind of ghost offices, There's nothing necessarily wrong with that, but it doesn't really add to the vitality of this corridor if you have, these kinds of uses with basically no people. And the buildings themselves kind of, again, turning their back on the street. You can see that some of these don't have any, fenestration, any glazing on the street. You don't know what's going on there. You can never see what's going on there. You can barely find a door to go into these buildings sometimes. We also have some examples of buildings that have been converted from residential, single-family residential, to office. And that's, something that happens because this district is sort of split, like across the half of a block, where on one side you may have still single-family residential, and on the other side, commercial or, zoning for Northwest 36th Street District. So it is a wide mix, and you also have some uses that are, a little bit more modern and intense, like, the office building that houses, what is it called, MRU, and a new building, which is the realtors. Thank you, Heidi. All right, go on to the next, please. Okay, I mentioned that there is residential use on this corridor. Most of it is multifamily, but it's older, very old, actually, multifamily. Apartments that are, not having their best moment anymore. Some of them are on the side streets. In a moment, I will show you the future land use map. There's sort of an exception to the district that is carved out for a concentration of these apartments that I guess was carved out so that they would not be non-conforming to the corridor, because otherwise they would have been. And we also, I mentioned, have some single-family residential homes, which don't have very good transitions or buffering from the corridor itself to their side of the use. Go on to the next. Then the other use that I mentioned, which is very predominant, is lodging. It is a logical use to have, natural use to have on this corridor because the airport is right next door. And there are a wide variety of lodging types. Many of them are old, and those, to some extent, are starting to disappear. but some of them still remain. And I know that some of those have been the problematic uses in the past. The older hotels are also, sometimes a little less of the standard that you would want to see. But there are some newer hotels that are starting to sort of pick up on this vibe that the city wants to go for a little bit higher quality product. And for example, we have the Wyndham Garden and, some of the other hotels that are sort of tucked into the back of the half block. Um, Go on, please. All right, moving on to the Abraham Tract. The character there is very, very different. We have one side of this district, which is all lodging, and it's kind of funny because it goes, kind of carries the spectrum from the east to the west of quality and intensity. And that has something to do with airport zoning restrictions, but also just, I think, kind of like getting closer that you get to the airport, maybe. And then you have some parcels that are very underdeveloped, that are used today mostly for parking purposes, for, for different types of businesses, rental cars, and so on. The other thing that is interesting about this area, I think, is that you have this really nice boulevard there. It's actually really nice. If you had development along that road, it would be very, very pretty. It would be very nice to walk along. There's not that much traffic today, but the infrastructure is not great. The sidewalks are kind of broken. There's a lot of flooding that happens on this road. And so that kind of tends to erode your sidewalks and your street as well. And you also have other transportation infrastructure that runs through it. The multimodal, the intermodal center is right down the street, basically. You have access to Tri-Rail, to bus service, to the airport. And I think that's actually amazing that you have this in very close proximity to this area. And yet, I don't think that there's a single person that could be brave enough to walk from there to that area because of the conditions that you have outside of this little pocket of this boulevard. There are no sidewalks. The traffic on South River Drive is really intense, and there's no protection for the pedestrian, obviously. So I think it would be very difficult in these conditions to promote that. Go on to the next. I talked about the other side of the sort of the block, and this is what it looks like. You have a lot of different kinds of hotels, as I mentioned, but you also have some aviation-oriented businesses. You have obviously a lot of stormwater management infrastructure there because of the presence of the ramps and the elevated highway. You have to have that management of stormwater underneath. Okay, let's go to the next section. So that's kind of my tour of my impressions as we went through our tour that time, and the other times that we have driven or walked by. I'm sure that you all have your own impressions, but I wanted to give you mine as someone who came in as a, sort of an outsider that was not familiar with these areas and how an outsider would see them. Forget the fact that I'm an urban planner, but I think that, most people would kind of look at them and maybe not identify these specifically, but kind of thought, well, my God, this is terrible. So just wanted to give you a sense of what our process is. We have a multi-phase process that is intended to have a spectrum of different kinds of public engagement throughout. This is one part of it where we are here today. We started a few months ago, which is talking to members of the public who are stakeholders within the district, either property owners, business operators, hotel operators, etc. And so, we're sort of stepping up our process as we move through it from mobilization to assessment to visioning to actually drafting the changes that we're going to recommend to you and so on. All right, let's go to the next. And where we are today is in that towards the end of our assessment phase. I talked about our stakeholders. We held a number of interviews with those stakeholders that are local to the districts. And our goal was to get a variety of perspectives and perceptions from them, kind of look at their understanding of the conditions and of the challenges and the potential opportunities, and identifying the common themes among the things that we heard. And at the same time, in parallel to that, we were doing an analysis that is fact-based, data-based, looking at the existing conditions and preparing a snapshot. It's a snapshot in time. This is not like, a monolith of conditions that are, always going to be there or that represent everything that this district is, but we looked at things that have to do with structural, physical conditions, function of the land, of the buildings, social, market, and economic conditions. As the mayor mentioned, we have somebody on our team who has been working on market and economic analysis. It's not a deep dive, but it's an assessment of the market conditions in the trade area, in the county, in the city, just to see what the market is providing us opportunities that can be leveraged here. And finally, for our side, we have been looking very deeply at your legal and regulatory framework for this district. We work with it every day because we're here, working as the planners as well. And so we constantly get inquiries from people that are coming to either try to set up a business there or see if they can redevelop something, and kind of having to describe some of the barriers and the ambiguities of the code. We are able to get a good sense of what we think can happen or needs to happen from that perspective. Go on to the next. So quickly, I mentioned that we have been talking to stakeholders. Back, I don't even remember exactly when that was, but last year, probably towards October maybe, we went on foot door to door and distributed over 50 flyers and talked to businesses and invited them to come and talk to us in a group setting, because we wanted that kind of synergy to, for them to hear from each other as well as talking to us. And we also sent over 40 emails to different businesses, some of them duplicates of those visits because we hadn't heard from someone. So we did a lot of targeted outreach. To date, we have had 14 interviews with about 20, 25 people. And we continue to reach out to stakeholders that we have not been able to talk to yet. So go on to the next, please. This is just a very, very abbreviated summary of the things that we have heard from these individuals. The first is that we got a very strong sense of the recognition that everybody has of the potential and the opportunities related particularly to the strategic location of this corridor and the Abraham Tract as well, that everybody understood it. This is the reason why some of the landowners bought land in this district. This is the reason why developers are interested, but they are experiencing very significant challenges to accomplishing plans. And so we know that from the ones that are here. We haven't heard and we haven't reached out yet to some of those who are not here, who may not have been looking, to get a sense of what it would take to get them interested in something that we also want to do, because that's a good perspective to have. What is preventing you from even looking at this corridor, right? But from those that we talked to, we also got a sense that many feel invested in the city, despite the fact that the Abraham Tract is isolated, the Northwest 36th Street district is sort of walled off. Many feel like, look, we are part of the city. We want, we want things to happen here that benefit both us and the city. And sometimes we feel like we are marginalized and maybe we're disconnected and we don't get to have that sort of synergy with the city, both from a functional as well as a structural perspective. And finally, they are aware, obviously, and they experience the challenges that you all have seen as elected officials. You mentioned them, kind of dating back to the pandemic. The residents also, issues of crime and mobility or lack thereof, drainage issues, And I know the city has some projects that they're working on. Sometimes they feel these stakeholders that those efforts are coming a little slow, or that they may not be enough to get the infrastructure to be what they need it to be. All right. So, and finally, I did talk about the development challenges, but what we heard over and over is that the code that we have right now has some regulations that are excessively constraining to make development that makes sense viable from a developer's perspective, and also very burdensome, and also that there are processes, and I also experienced this in trying to explain it to people, that there are processes that are very unclear. I think I have bored you already telling you, the problems that we have with procedures in this code, and so I'm not going to elaborate, but we heard this from these stakeholders. Next, please. All right, I'm going to walk you through some of our analysis of existing conditions just so that I can lead you towards some conclusions. Let's go to the next, please. We already looked at the boundaries of this district. It's only 5.6% of the total land area of the city, 106 acres. It's very small, actually, and yet it's really important. Let's go to the next, please. We looked at the existing land use pattern. What we found in looking at this together with the age of the buildings and the typologies of buildings that exist is that we have a generally stagnant mix of existing land uses that have not changed a lot over a long time. The most predominant land use that we have in this district is lodging, followed by actually the other way, commercial land uses, because of the amount of buildings that we have that are dedicated to commercial use, and that covers both retail and restaurant and office, and followed by lodging, which is about 34% of the land. Okay, the reason why this area is so significant is because it represents the largest concentration of commercial land use that you have in your city. You have your downtown, your CBD, you have a couple of little nodes of what is called neighborhood commercial, and then you have this area. This is it, basically. You don't have industrial, per se. You don't have any other commercial areas. So this is where commercial uses tend to predominate. It's a very different character from the one of your downtown, as it should be, right? The other thing that is interesting, which you can see in that pattern, is that it's a very fragmented parcel pattern. You have lots of tiny little lots that are not owned by the same people. That is a big challenge to assembling sites for development. There are some opportunities for that. There are some sites that can be catalytic sites for development, but most of it is small sites, okay, except for the Abraham Tract. All right, let's go to the next. The future land use map, which is in the comprehensive plan, shows this area. There's two major districts, obviously. One is the Northwest 36th Street district, and then you have the Abraham Tract. Those are the districts in themselves. We also have, I mentioned a small area multifamily, which is that sort of brick color that you see there in the middle. And I think it was specifically carved out because of the restrictions that we have on multifamily in this district. These are existing uses, but if they were designated as Northwest 36th Street District, they would be non-conforming. Now, this concentration, as I showed you from the pictures, these are older apartment buildings. They're sort of low-rise buildings. They're not modern multifamily product at all. And you probably could call these affordable housing because it's probably where you would find affordable units. You have a lot of these apartments in the city where you have multifamily. They're older apartment buildings. There's nothing wrong with that. I think it's great that you have affordable housing in your city. But it's kind of sad that the only way to do that is by allowing these buildings to decline and decline and decline so they can continue to be affordable. We have some statistics there that I'm not necessarily going to go over, but you can see that, again, you know, these are very tiny concentrations of land relative to the rest of the city. Okay, let's go to the next one, which is our zoning map. So the zoning of these areas does reflect the future land use map, except for the fact that the zoning does not carve out that area of multifamily, which is interesting because that means that those uses are non-conforming anyway. So the future land use carves it out, but the zoning doesn't. So it's like, you know, contradicting each other. And then we have the surrounding districts. We have on the north west side, north of Fairway, between Curtis and Palmetto Drive, we have what is called the Airport Gulf District, which has a pretty interesting character, and there's some synergy that happens with this district. We also have, you know, some multifamily on the edges. That's the orange that you see between Airport Gulf and Palmetto Drive, essentially. And then we also have single-family residential on the north part of those blocks. So you can see those blocks that go from Northwest 36th Street to Oakwood. They're split sort of around half. It's not an ideal situation for those uses to be, for that zoning to be sort of drawn that way, because then you have these residential districts that have very little transition. You know, essentially they're abutting, you know, these commercial uses, and they're not as protected as they could be. All right, let's go on. Zoning regulations, I talked a little bit about this, but our analysis shows us that the use mix and the typology of uses has some very arbitrary and contradictory restrictions. There are some exceptions that are very unclear as to how they're treated. We have a marginal front setback, and I know that the ideal is that we are going to try to push the buildings towards the streets so that we have this sort of urban environment, but we know that this corridor is not the kind of urban environment that you can have a 5-foot setback on, a 5-foot sidewalk on, and be pedestrian friendly. So, you know, what really should be happening is that those buildings should be pushed back more so that we have a wider sidewalk where we can actually do something to protect the pedestrian environment there. If that's what we really want on Northwest 36th Street District, on Northwest 36th Street, I'm sorry. But then we have the other challenge, which is that we have some parcels that are very shallow. So if we push back, we can detract from the area that you have to build. So we have some challenges there. We also have in those regulations a very disproportionate rear step back. That's, you know, after a certain height, you push the building back. Developers and architects find that model extremely inefficient for building, because you have to do all kinds of things structurally to allow for that building to be sort of like, we call it the wedding cake, you know, sort of like in layers. But in this case, the challenge is not from that structural cost perspective. It's also the fact that it's very, very excessive. So, you know, you may be pushing the building back 50 feet rather than maybe 10 or 20 after a certain height. We don't have any lot coverage restrictions. We don't have any green space requirement. We don't have any pervious area requirement. That's something that is lacking in some of your other districts as well, but this one definitely doesn't have it. And since it's supposed to be our most intensely developed uh, district, it's definitely necessary to have some consideration for stormwater and for green space. We have nominal screening requirements. I mentioned those lack of transitions between the residential, single-family residential to the north and these commercial uses to the south. And so that's something else that we have to balance, providing that protection. We have a floor area ratio bonus system that is similar to some extent to the one that we addressed last year here at the Gateway. But I think that there are some portions of that are questionable in terms of the actual benefit that it provides to the city or the actual benefit that it can provide to the developer to make it attractive. For example, hotel is already a permitted use as of right, but we offer an incentive for people to do hotels. What's the point? So we're looking at some of that, in our analysis as well. We have parking standards that do not address all the uses that are permitted. So I have people calling me and saying, well, I have this type of use. What kind of standard am I supposed to use? And we're sort of having to fudge it, that's not the way that I like to exercise planning and zoning. And then we talked about the procedures. They're very unclear. There's lots of ambiguities, not just in terms of what the sequence is, but also who has authority to make certain decisions, where it goes, what's required to be submitted for review, etc. Go on to the next, please. And then, we just kind of jump from there to the major barrier that we have. One of the uses, I talked about the use mix and the typologies. Multifamily is allowed as of right in this district as part of mixed use. But your charter says that any kind of multifamily, regardless of where it is in the city, more than 2 units, which any multifamily is going to be, cannot be more than a certain height, which is, I think, 45 feet. Sometimes I get it confused. I think that 45 is in the charter. I'm sorry? 40 feet in the charter, but the zoning for Northwest 36th Street District says that it's 55 for certain parts of it, and then 120 for another. That's what would accommodate a mixed-use building with structured parking. 55 feet cannot do that. 50 feet cannot do that. 40 feet cannot do that, right? So we have zoning that says one thing, charter says the opposite. And that's something that we are asking you to give us some direction on to move forward with a certain strategy, if that's what you want to do. All right, let's go to the next.
The charter supersedes there, right? So
Yes, it does.
Thank
All right. I talked already a little bit about this, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but you can see that the vast majority of the buildings are very old. 45% of them are over 50 years old. We have also 11% that are over 20 years old. And the majority of the buildings are only 1 and 2 stories. Those are the original buildings that were there when Northwest 36th Street was not what it is today, this throughway. And I kind of think that it's kind of nice in that area between Curtis and Fairway, because it kind of gives me a sense of what it might have been like at the time, kind of more of a Main Street character, perhaps. But the fact is that the rest of the district is also like that, and it just doesn't work. All right, next, please. Despite the fact that the majority of the buildings are old, which suggests to us that there hasn't really been a lot of turnover in development, that tells you something about this district. We have had some projects recently. The Miami Realtors Association building is new. What's going on?
I would,
You're sabotaging me.
to find out.
no, I'm trying to
You didn't like it.
We're good, we're good.
Just-
What about?
Can we just
Go to yours.
let it go that way? Is that okay?
Yeah, we're.
All right, okay.
It's gonna
Okay.
like that.
Miami Realtors Association, brand new. It's a very nice building. Sort of setback. It's not a high rise. It's a very modest building. Good for their needs. That's fine. Uh, we also have some existing hotels that are starting to, look at improving. The former Holiday Inn just came in. They just became a different kind of hotel entirely. They're more of a boutique hotel, and they have not only done interior renovation, but they've also improved the exterior appearance. And we have a little project that is converting one of those old gas stations into a different kind of use, which is going to be commercial. It's not ideal. I think that it could be something different, but it's better than having it empty,
An
right?
empty gas station.
All right, let's go on. We also have had a couple of projects that were recently approved, which are very promising. One of them is very imminent. You approved it last year as a council, which is the Pilot House, which is an extended stay hotel. It's connected to the Wyndham Garden. And that project is about to submit their building permits, so we're very excited to see it actually materialize. The other one is a little bit farther to the east. Is what, I guess people have referred to as the Oliva project. It's a mixed-use development project. It's pretty significant. And it has a hotel use combined with office, retail, and a rooftop restaurant. My understanding is that there are some changes that perhaps they're going to make to this project, and if that happens, perhaps it's going to have to come again before you. But we don't really know at this point what the timeline is for that to happen. But the other one is pretty imminent. Let's go on. I mentioned that we have some potentially significant catalyst sites in addition to those that we just mentioned. Sucre is the one that has the Wyndham Garden and the Pilot House. But we also have obviously the Abraham Tract. That's number one on that list. You can see that is a very significant acreage. Miami-Dade Aviation owns a lot of land here, as you know. Even though that's in public ownership, things can happen, as we all know. And those are very significant acreages as well, individually and together. And then we have a few other properties that are, not as large, but that can provide a good assemblage of land that could be attractive for a developer. The challenge with the rest of the corridor is that it consists of a lot of really smaller, scattered, maybe a same owner owns one or two, but then, there's a whole bunch of other owners. In order to assemble a viable site, it takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of money. Let's go on to the next. Among those sites, we talked about some of the catalyst sites and potential future projects that are not in the city's pipeline right now. These are not projects that, are in pre-application. They're not, kind of being reviewed for anything. These are just sort of informal conversations and just sort of through the grapevine that we know. That the site on Lejeune and Northwest 36th Street District, consisting of the office depot and the Pollo Tropical, are owned by one party, and that's a good sized site. As you know, there have been conversations about the larger of the sites that are owned by aviation for a potential residential project of some sort. And then there's a site that is on the double loaded area with frontage on both Northwest 36th Street and Fairway that has three parcels that has been talking. In fact, I think that at some point in the past they came to the council. I'm not sure, if it was like 2017 or something, but it has gone through several iterations, and the idea there is a hotel. Okay, next. In addition to looking at issues related specifically to land use, planning and zoning, we looked at other factors. I talked about the pedestrian unfriendliness of the area. We looked at that in just 1 second, but we also looked at the connectivity of the roadway network. Inside the city, there isn't hardly any. The mayor mentioned the blockage of the streets beyond a certain point in all those blocks. There's only 3 streets that go through from Northwest 36th Street. The rest of them are closed at, not even at Oakwood, but like halfway. It's very sort of jagged, and the irony is that the alleys in those blocks are open. So, they have to be open because they service, but they provide the access that the streets don't. With that said, the regional connectivity of this area is unsurpassable. You have, several corridors that are major, that connect to other destinations and other parts of the city, where, you have important employment centers. The airport is next to it. And we'll see this in a moment, but you have lots of employment surrounding this area as well. So that's a plus. And the city is at the heart of everything. And that is certainly true in terms of its strategic location. So let's go on to the next. We looked at the connectivity from the perspective of public transportation. There are a lot of bus routes that travel on Northwest 36th Street and Lejeune. There are lots of bus stops, but because the area is blocked from the rest of the city, if somebody actually wanted to use transit from the city, it would be kind of hard to get there and use the transit. We have a city shuttle that has only 2 stops that are sort of touching the corridor. The others are not. And then I think that what I've understood is that there used to be a stop of that shuttle that went across to the Abraham Tract, right? Yes. And that doesn't happen anymore. We heard a lot from the hotel operators how challenging that is. Like, well, the city asks us to put these posters with the QR code saying, "Oh, we have all these wonderful things," and people come here and sometimes they don't have a car. They're like, "Oh, let's go somewhere. Let's go somewhere for dinner." Who would cross? Who would cross those streets, right? There are no walkways. There are no sidewalks. There are no pedestrian, crossing that are easy. I mean, it's just kind of a scary thing. So there are challenges. These are not insurmountable, but they will require quite a bit of work. Let's go to the next. I'm not going to belabor this too much, but obviously we have some factors of walkability and accessibility that are pretty significant. Those circles that you see on the screen that overlap between blue and sort of pinkish are 1/4 mile distance from a bus stop and 1/2 mile distance from quarter mile distance from a city shuttle stop and 1/4 mile from a transit stop. You see that there's a lot of coverage, and it's, that's fantastic. But the problem is that even though that distance is short, as the crow flies, we have all these blockages of the streets that do not allow you to, get to those locations easily. Either, if you're coming from the residential area or if you're going into the city. The kind of funny thing is that we have a lot of short blocks here, and that is a sign of a very good grid from an urban planning perspective. And yet, we don't have connectivity, which is kind of ironic for that same kind of grid pattern. I talked about the fact that there are no sidewalks on the Abraham Tract except for that roadway, and the entire area is pretty isolated otherwise, as I've been kind of reiterating, from the rest of the city. Let's go on to the next. Oops.
Yeah.
I think, is this the first one or the second one?
No, I went 2 over.
Okay. So this is the correct one? No, one more. There we are. All right. So it's a big file,
I don't know. Getting to the heavy.
but I'm still gonna fire you, Juan,
I know. Fire myself.
as my assistant.
One more over.
What does that pay, one? Being her assistant.
Not much, not much. All right, here we are. All right. One of the things that we tried to do, which is sort of a complementary to the market analysis, is look at the regional and local assets, right? If this is going to be a destination, are there really places to go, and what are we competing with, right? So internally, I think there are some good assets, some good strengths. We have, for example, we have actually parkland within this district. Is it very well developed? No. Is it, could there be more to it? Could there be more space that is green within the district? Sure. Could there be more within the Abraham Tract? There's nothing there, obviously, but could there be? Yes, absolutely. There are opportunities for that. We looked at things like, food and beverage establishments, lodging, park and open space transit stops. We looked at employment and institutions of education, etc. And then, things like where there's a flood hazard. So all of these are identified here, and you can see that there are a lot of green boxes that represent assets, and there's a few yellow assets that represent opportunities, and some red that represent what we call threats. And threats are just, things that can prevent you from achieving certain goals. Okay. I've talked a little bit about what these assets are, and what the threats are. So I'm not going to belabor it, but I just wanted you to know that we did this analysis from that perspective. And then if you go to the next, please, we also did this from the perspective of the region, right? We kind of fed this into the market analysis. And one of the things that we have to take into consideration, well, first of all, again, strategic position, nothing can be better. You have these employment hubs that surround you, from the airport to these manufacturing, logistical, warehousing centers that are essentially on, two sides of you. So you have a lot of employment. But one of the, I don't even know if I still have it, but within the market piece, there's a little diagram that my colleague, who couldn't be here tonight, prepared, that shows the inflow and the outflow of workers. People who live in the city, who work in the city, versus people who live outside and come into the city for work, versus the people who live in the city and go elsewhere. And we have a lot of people who live in the city and go elsewhere. And we have a lot of people who come outside from other areas because they don't live here. So that in itself represents an opportunity, right? Market-wise. But we also have to recognize that we have some competition. Doral has 2 lifestyle centers, right? If we are thinking that maybe we want to do something like that here, they have 2 that are already well established. And we also have some major attractions in Hialeah with the Hialeah Park Casino, the Miami Casino. Those are attractions for the tourist sector that stays in these hotels. And we don't have a lot of local transportation to take them to these places, but there is transportation that exists, and these are outside of the city. All right. Oh, before I forget, there's also, like a tremendous opportunity with the ongoing construction of Freedom Park. Let's not forget that. I mean, you see the proximity of it. Is that yellow square down there? How close it is. You could walk if you wanted to from the Abraham Tract. And that green little bus, the box that's right on top of that, that's the MIC. So these are incredible assets that are within the sphere, and we just need to find a way to leverage them to our advantage. Okay. Next. All right. This is an analysis of, well, it's our attempt to translate the airport zoning restrictions, which was quite an undertaking. But what this tells you is that there are some noise contour zones that have influence on the Northwest 36th Street District and the airport and the Abraham Tract. Um, those are represented by the teal and the blue lines that sort of zigzag or kind of slide, through that map. And the DNL represents the decibels that, are acceptable in those areas. There are some standards that have to be met in terms of construction type to mitigate noise. So, those are things that have to be taken into consideration. I don't think that we have anything in our code that says that you actually have to do that. Also, the code does say that, development that happens or redevelopment that happens in these districts has to be reviewed by the airport to make sure that is consistent with their zoning restrictions. So noise contours is one thing. The other thing that we have, which is very significant, is the maximum allowable height, which are all those yellow lines that go in every direction. It was very difficult to read these maps when we received them from the airport, but we did our best. Those are zones of 10 feet increments. And so if you see the red line, for example, in the Abraham Tract, we have two. One is 100 feet, I think it's 100 feet or 110, no, 100. And then on the sort of bottom corner, it says 50. So the yellow line to the left of that is going to be 40 feet. And the one beyond that is going to be 30 feet. And then on the other side is going to be 60 feet and so on and so on and so on. So on that part of the Abraham Tract, on that southern part of the Abraham Tract, which is one of the greatest opportunities for development that we see, we have some pretty significant height restrictions. 50 feet at that center line, 60 feet towards the end, 40 feet towards the other side. And then on the north side of the Abraham Tract, that's where we have the hotels, and they go all the way up to 130 feet. The Embassy Suites building is the tallest building that we have there, and the reason is because it's in that sort of higher end of the of the height restriction, which is 120 to 130 feet. So we have some significant restrictions there. They do not apply to the Northwest 36th Street District. You see that there are no yellow lines there, but we do have a limit by variance from the airport. Our limit is 120 feet by zoning, but from the airport side, you could get up to 160 if you get a variance from them, okay? So that's kind of the difference. Let's go to the next. All right, I'm gonna give you a very, very quick summary of what my colleague Eric did. I am not a market person, so please don't ask me a lot of technical questions about his work. Fortunately, couldn't be here, personal circumstances, but let's go to the next. What we were trying to do here is just trying to understand the market supply and the demand for certain uses that could be attracted to the study area and what the potential regulatory and structural barriers are to those uses actually being attracted to the area and what we need to do in order to ease the path, so to speak. Now, what the work that my colleague Eric does is not to tell you what you need to do. It's not to tell you what you need to accept here, but to give you the options so that you can make informed decisions, okay? All right, well, give us, my team, the information so that we can make informed recommendations to you, and then you can make informed decisions. Let's go on to the next. So he looked at all the data that we provided. He looked at his own data. He looked at basically, the county, the city, and a trade area, which is about 7 to 10 minutes from the boundaries of this area. And, the conclusion, generally speaking, is that, again, no need to repeat it too much, but Miami Springs is strategically located, strategically positioned to benefit from the region-wide need for infill and redevelopment opportunities because we are running out of other land, right? Let's go to the next. And then he proceeded to sort of break it down by type of use. He looked at multifamily and hotel. I mentioned both of these are permitted uses in our zoning today, but we have a barrier to building actual multifamily here. So in his analysis, we see that the demand for mid to higher density market rate multifamily development is and will remain steady countywide and within the trade area that he reviewed for Miami Springs, and that the time is ripe to position the Southeast Springs district to capture a solid share of that demand if you so wish. Um, and with respect to the hotels, this area is intrinsically um, um, tied to the airport and to the idea of lodging. That's a strong market that will continue to exist, but the idea is to begin attracting through a lot of these other changes that we could end up making, to regulations or to marketing or, working with which I know you are doing already, to the greater Miami-Dade Convention and Tourism Bureau, attracting higher quality product by, making it easier for these hotels to come and be viable here. Next. For retail and office, his conclusion is that we have physical constraints, and I already talked about some of that, very small parcels, restricted mobility, that, in his opinion, will continue to limit the amount of retail and office, in particular retail, and confine it to the ground floor of mixed-use development, if and when that can happen, right? He sees the retail and office markets as being complementary to the other two uses, the multifamily and hotel and mixed use, but not as a leading or driving use. In other words, you're not going to have a predominant retail or commercial district here, but it can be combined with other uses to complement it. If you bring market rate multifamily development, for example, then you're going to be able to attract complement of uses that will serve those residential units, supermarket, pharmacy, sort of the day-to-day, in addition to potential destination uses that can serve more of the lodging sector. Let's go to the next. And then for the Abraham Tract, his conclusion is that although the airport zoning restrictions preclude housing and assembly uses for the most part in that district, the area is naturally positioned to attract and to support industrial and commercial development. And by industrial doesn't mean heavy manufacturing necessarily, but more light and also warehousing and logistics. That is already happening to the south in the Palmer Lake Metropolitan Urban Center District, which Miami-Dade County has been promoting. This is the kind of development that you see that is going there. And is that kind of development possible here? Maybe to a smaller scale, but absolutely, it is possible. This is definitely a district that could attract that, and it would serve very well because of the zoning restrictions that the airport imposes. Okay, let's go to the next. So the bottom line with respect to the market study is that it reveals a strong demand for market rate multifamily and hotel development with retail and office in a support role, that the Abraham Tract has a great potential for light manufacturing, warehousing, and logistics, as I mentioned, with ancillary office and commercial and airport supporting lodging. And that when we had these conversations with the hotel operators, with the property owners and prospective developers that are already in the area, all of them, without us prompting them, told us the same things. This is what I see here. This is why I came here. Like the hotel developers, for example, Sucre, they had no experience building hotels before they came to the United States. But they saw this land, they saw the airport, they saw where, this is positioned, and they thought, this is a great opportunity. and and it is a great opportunity for these types of things. When they started trying to get through the city, they realized there were a lot of barriers, and they have become frustrated with some of these obstacles. But they're still very committed, and they still see that potential. So I just kind of wanted to give you a sort of immediate example of someone who told us the same thing, and we heard it over and over from all the stakeholders that we talked to. Next, please. So I wanted to kind of just summarize what the potential benefits are of looking at these types of uses, especially the ones that we say that we allow, but we don't really allow, which is multifamily. What are the benefits that doing something to make that use more viable could bring? First of all, fiscal benefits, of course, in the form of tax revenue, disposable income to spend, um, beautification and visual appeal of the area, because if you're going to live in that area, you're not really going to stand for it being, you're going to invest in, let's say that, we're looking at market rate for sale apartments. You're not going to put up with an environment that is going to devalue your investment. You also are going to have more reputable operators, both of housing development as well as commercial development. By having more people there, you're going to have what we call eyes on the street, which is going to begin to help with issues of crime. People who live there are going to have a vested interest in the area as well as in the city. And it's going to bring the complement of uses that I already mentioned before, because it's going to be needed to serve that area as well as going to have a market within the city, the rest of the city. Next, please. Okay, so here we come to the important part for me. Go to the next, please, which is I've kind of been hinting at some of these, but essentially what our analysis reveals is this. The Northwest 36th Street corridor has several distinct zones that we identify by character. And we think that there's a potential to carve each one of these out and treat them differently in terms of zoning, so that they can be very tailored to that character and create these sort of subzones, sub-districts, okay? That's a question that we want to ask you, if you think that's something that you think we should pursue. We also would urge the council to consider re-examining the constraints that we have on the multifamily development, because it's, again, as the market study reveals, probably the highest and best use that you can bring aside from lodging, and we just can't do it. Right now, there's absolutely no way that a developer is going to come in here and say, I'm going to have a mixed-use development with retail on the bottom, structured parking, and then market rate units on the top. You can't do it. The code allows it, but the charter doesn't. And then there's a possibility eventually to kind of begin considering the district boundaries for Northwest 36th Street District to match these distinct zones, and perhaps even other potential actions that could be taken. But that's potentially for a further, in the future, evaluation. Let's go to the next slide. Regardless of these three potential paths that I need to ask you to give me direction on, I think that we still need to address certain regulatory issues. I've mentioned these before, but we need to look at this incongruence between the future land use map that has the multifamily and the zoning doesn't have it. I mean, we need to figure out how to reconcile that. Part of it has to do with this charter issue that we have, right? Because it renders the existing multifamily, which is older, non-conforming. But we need to sort of, fall on one side or the other to address that issue. So that goes to the second line there. We need to kind of think about if we are thinking of multifamily, we need to kind of figure out in what form. There's different forms of multifamily, obviously. We need to address the unclear exceptions that I mentioned before. We need to address the setbacks, especially for the front of the property, the step backs, the lack of coverage, lot coverage, et cetera, the screening and buffering issues, the FAR bonus system, all of these things that I mentioned before. I think that we can proceed to address these in an amendment to the code, regardless of some of the other things that need to be decided. All right, next. So to summarize, the questions that I'm here to ask you is, should we think about creating new zoning districts or even overlays, although I'm not particularly fond of overlays, with distinct rules for each area? This would potentially involve adopting a vision for the activation of the entire district, as well as individually for each zone, cleaning up the existing regulations to support and nurture the vision or visions, promoting beautification and design appeal that is consistent with the standard that you have for the rest of your city, which is, a really high bar, and encouraging pedestrian-friendly frontages, safe walking, circulation, access, and connectivity. The second question has to do with multifamily development, market rate. That's what we're looking at. That's what the market study tells us. Should we look for ways to promote that? How do we do that? Well, one is to remove the barriers, obviously. That's the first thing. But then the other possibility is to just look at these distinct zones and carve out one or two, depending on what the final vision is for each one, with an exemption from the current density and height restrictions to make it viable for multifamily development to actually be built in this area. So that's kind of where we are. Those are the questions that I have in front of you. Let's go to the next, because I'm not really sure. We can look at this later, but I would stop now and let you ask me any questions or go on to discussion.
Yeah,
Thank
so
you for your time.
thank you. And actually, Sylvia, I wanted to very sincerely thank you. I know that this has been a lot of work. When I did that brief timeline, I should have said it was a brief timeline of council intervention as it relates to this district, right? When we were in the throes of the pandemic, it was more of an intervention, in terms of what was necessitated at the time. And then it turned from intervention to investment. We created that economic development task force because we wanted answers about how to promote the type of development and that we were looking for. And so when they came up with that suggestion that we have regulatory constraints that are really limiting the type of investment that could happen in that area, that's when we knew that we needed to bring in people with expertise in planning and development, and that's why you guys were assigned this task.
Thank you.
Thank you. And you guys did a comprehensive examination of not only the area, but like the physical and infrastructure conditions of the area. I think it's Lambert turned in a very thorough economic market assessment, right, and development trends and opportunities. And also, I think that you presented a real thorough view of the zoning and codes and regulations, and even our charter and all of those things and the procedures of the city. At the end of the day, this is just adding to the next step in the timeline of our intervention as a council. We want to know how we can impact or influence and promote the revitalization of that area. And so this really helps. This is exactly what we needed. So I want to open it up to discussion. I did want to just bring up one point, is that because one of the recommendations that we're going to discuss now is about market rate multifamily. And I just want to point out that something that was important is that live local is something that people ask a lot about, right? Live local is at state legislation that allows for developments to happen that may supersede your local zoning in the name of workforce housing and addressing the housing crisis. When we say market rate, we're talking about things that are that's not that. And as a matter of fact, we were waiting on a legal opinion that we received right at the beginning of the year, in the beginning of the spring, uh, regarding Live Local. And this area of Northwest 36th Street is exempt because of regulations, because of the airport, are exempt from Live Local. So when we have this, because I feel like people worry, is this going to be workforce housing or is it going to be low income housing? Like, what if you're opening this up to multifamily? Does that mean that this is going to be some kind of cost control, right? And we are exempt from Live Local in this area, so this is a conversation about the vision that we want to have. So when we're saying market rate multifamily, that's what we're referring to. So with that, can you go back to the slide of the recommendations that you make and that you need direction from the council? So there. So I want to open it up to my colleagues for questions or discussions. I think that those are kind of intertwined, so I don't think that we can kind of discuss them individually, but I'll open it up. Does anybody have anything that they want to bring up? Vice Mayor?
I do have a question. I know you mentioned in there about parcels that don't have existing structures.
Yeah.
And you put 26%, which is a pretty high percentage. Is that including the aviation tracks and
Yes.
Abraham track?
So yes, when we talk about parcels without structures, we're not talking about vacant parcels because obviously there are parking. Uh, so there's something there, but there are no buildings. And that 26% is those parcels that are either parking, surface parking, or other type of non-structural development. But yeah.
That's fine. Just kind of, obviously this all kinds of goes inside with feasibility and the possible potential of having these uses becomes a reality in the future. Obviously, we have major obstacles with our regulatory issues and, unclear procedures, ambiguity in our language. So you're obviously aware of that, and that's one of the big steps from the beginning. Is obviously when people from the outside look in, thinking of doing stuff, obviously that's the first hurdle. It's like,
Yeah.
it's not clear. Why am I going to start, putting energy and time into all this? There's a lot of information on this, and I think it's going to be a work in progress. Obviously, we need to, the part, your suggestion on carving out the district, I think that's obviously something to consider, especially when we get more feedback from the community and see how it all fits in with our community. But definitely is a possibility there. And overall, obviously, this is the gateway to our community, and it's an eyesore, and it's bringing our police and everybody else major problems. So it's time to address it, and I think it's a matter of just taking all this into heart and figuring out what's best for all of us. But for right now, I guess it's just trying to absorb all this information and getting some public input and see what we can elaborate from there.
Sylvia, the George T. Baker is owned by who?
Miami-Dade County Public Schools,
Yes.
and it's not part, I know you had it in the picture, but it's not part of the Abraham tract. That's that little square
It's
cutout in
That's
the middle.
carved out.
Yeah,
Right.
so Baker is
So-
not part of it.
So it's not part of it. It's just adjacent. It's sort of the kind of uses that adjoin, and sort of the character of airport-oriented uses that we have in that whole area.
And do you know of their future plans? Are they staying there? I mean, they've been there since I was in high school, so.
Yes,
Um,
I do not.
you do not, okay. And that's next to Freedom Park. So, well, we're
Almost.
kind of there. So what is Freedom Park doing with restrictions and with development? Are you thinking maybe we could benefit symbiotically from Freedom Park?
Oh, absolutely. I think that there's going to be, and Lake Palmer is already kind of looking to leverage that entire area, even with housing, because I think that there's going to be a lot of demand for condominium kind of development where people are, I mean, somebody was telling me, I don't even remember the last couple of days, that there are people who come in to see soccer games, and they have an apartment just to come in to watch the games on a Sunday, or whatever. And so that kind of tells you that there is a very high potential for housing that even serves that. You're going to have a lot of people that are going to be coming in from even from abroad for those games. And we have a major soccer event that is coming to our city soon. So I think that that demand is going to be there, and everybody's trying to capitalize. And there's probably no other community that is so well positioned as Miami Springs to capitalize on it.
I see, and I know we always speak and concentrate about with the Okeechobee entrance being the entrance to Miami Springs, but I think that's a 50, 60-year-old
Notion.
notion, I guess. Yeah, it was true back then. But today, I really see Northwest 36th Street as the entrance to Miami Springs, which is, I find it ironic that we pride ourselves on being a tree city and there isn't a single tree on 36th Street, right? We really need a larger green component. But yeah, I totally agree that we really need, I see that as the face and the introduction to Miami Springs as people land in the airport and cross 36th Street. I think it really needs to show where a character can be. Better position Miami Springs. And I in complete agreement that with all the restrictions that we have, it just makes it not viable for developers to come in and really activate that area. We're going to be stuck with the same problem if we don't try to come up with a better solution for them.
Councilman?
So I think you covered a lot of things there. That was a great, it was very in depth. And I mean, from where you were talking about the Abraham tracks and how there's a lot of potential by the river in that area. I think that's a great area to start looking at in developing, especially because it doesn't affect the residential, which is what I think would most of the residents would be worried about, is losing that small town feel. I think that's like the top priority. But also another priority is, the tax base. So we do need to find a way to bring businesses in order to lower our millage rate. So I do think that Southeast Springs District is a good area also to bring maybe some mixed use, but we need to get more feedback from the residents. Overall, the crime is an issue on 36th Street. The fact that we worry about bringing workforce housing, and it's ironic that we already have low-income housing in that area, is something also that we should consider talking about and educating the public on, because if we already have something even worse than workforce housing, which is, I don't know if there's a difference between the two. Sometimes I think they play with the words.
Yes.
But so if we do have something worse than workforce housing, which is low-income housing, then we definitely have something to work with there as well. So, and then also the issue with the sidewalk, I know, I think it's by the Chase, right? Is that where you were talking about, that the sidewalk is really close to?
Almost everywhere. There's
But
very,
mainly-
very few stretches where that sidewalk is not that. I mean, there's one instance where I saw like the sidewalk is like this maybe, and there's a bench, and there's a light pole, and both of them is like they leave a space like this for walking or somebody in a wheelchair to try to navigate. It's impossible.
And then the cars are coming through
Oh,
there.
yeah.
It's a main. Overall, I think it's a great area, like 36th Street. There's so much potential there, right? Someone today, and please don't take this into what I think is they had compared it to a degree to like what US 1, right? Where there's a lot of traffic. It's a main highway. So obviously, number one, we want to keep the small town feel in Miami Springs. We don't want to lose that. But we also want to take the crime away, and we want to find a way to lower taxes. And I think this can be the way to get to that.
So I just wanted to, so again, thank you for doing this. If I look at these, I think that the idea of so the Northwest 36th Street district is a large district. I think that breaking it up, I know that, look, I live there, right? So there are some parts of it that have a different character, right? I don't think that there's a lot you can do in terms of incentivizing development, and I don't know that everywhere that's what you want is to incentivize like property assemblage and let's go, because there are areas right there on Oakwood that it's single family, and you're right there, right? So I think that it's wise to get this large, if we're going to do something with this large district, right, that we feel like we want to revitalize. First of all, let's break it up into some sections where we can have different rules that'll promote different things. I think there's plenty to clean up. Now, I do understand when you look at that market analysis, right? It says that one of the two things that are strongest is obviously because of our proximity to Miami International Airport, right? Lodging, right? And hotels. And the other thing that's strong, the market that's also very strong is multifamily. Uh, Now we got hotels, and I know that we attract what we have, what we attract, right, and allow. And right now, the way the current regulations are incentivizing hotels, because you can go up to 12 stories along there, and that's valuable property. So in order to get return on investment, you've got to be able to do a development that it will get you the return. But for multifamily, I think that that's the piece that is kind of missing. If those are the two strong, because like we've already got 25 hotels, right? I don't know to what extent we want to continue to lean into, because look, we've got some good hotels and we've got a couple more projects in the pipeline. They look like they're going to be, but we've also got, it's very well documented that although things are not as bad as they were during the pandemic, 40% of our police calls still go to the hotels. Uh, uh, and we don't get any of the bed tax, and that's a big issue, right? So I think that there is a blind spot there, and I think it is the multifamily and this whole notion of infill development, where you bring in something that's going to be, and it's going to be density, right? But you bring in multifamily, and then that's going to provide the sense of community that you don't have with just a bunch of hotels, right? If people are throwing garbage on the floor next to a hotel, nobody cares because you don't live there, right? But when it's your community, I feel like the sense I get from the what I'm inferring from that market analysis is that the thing that could kind of raise all ships there is some multifamily, but we do have some regulatory constraints, and one of them by charter, which means that but I think that is something that should be explored. So again, I think that this is something that I'm encouraged that we should continue to look at. I don't think we need, do you guys want to have any further discussion? I think that we can try to, do you guys have a sense, consensus-wise, because we don't need a motion or vote, but can we give staff direction to carry out these two requests to create zones, and also explore some ways that we could promote market rate multifamily development, which means that we would have to carve out some areas where the current density and height restrictions would have to be, you'd have to change it in those carved out areas. So, but I'll start with Vice Mayor, and then give us your thoughts in terms of, are you in favor of giving staff direction for that?
Yeah, definitely. Like to, do the divisions of the different districts, especially getting the feedback from the community in general. Obviously, they need to play a part in this, get involved, and then all the regulatory stuff. So yeah, those two in particular are important. That you should start with that, and think that that'll clear some conversation.
I agree. As long as we keep in the forefront that our residents want to prioritize the small town feel.
Sure.
I agree. Yes on both.
Yes, I agree. I mean, I'm looking at the bullet points. It's almost like you can't do one without the other. I see that as one package. So yeah, I agree as well.
All right, so I'd like to be clear that, this is going to be a process, right? So you guys are going to take this direction.
Can I get one to
Sure.
go to the next slide? Because
Oh,
I
sure,
did want to
please.
I did want to make sure that
Please, thank you.
you all understood that we're not going to go away and draft this ordinance and come back to you and have you vote on it, right? We still have a process to go through. This is for us to be able to move forward with these ideas, but we have to go to the public. That's the next sort of part of the public engagement process that we have in our overall step-by-step process that I showed you at the beginning. And so with direction, we can begin to develop some concepts that we can bring to a series of open house. It could be one open house or a couple of open houses where we invite the public to help us craft this vision and help us decide on the strategies. So that's what I wanted to emphasize to you, so that nobody thinks that this is if you give us this direction today, it's a done deal, and we come back in 7 months with an ordinance that you are going to look at. There's still more steps to.
Right, my thought was that you're going to bring the council back ideas of different ways that we could accomplish some of these things. And
Yes.
then I think that we have enough here to start a public debate, right? That we want to look at that area, and I think we're giving direction to see how we can, fix a lot of things that are impeding us over there, but also, look at how we could increase some population density there so that it would support, the kind of revitalization that we want. That you could do that a million different ways. So you're going to bring us some options.
Not a million, but
Okay,
bring you some
but you're going to
options.
bring us some ideas, and then that, I think we've got enough to have a public debate already. Like,
Yes.
what could this look like? Is this the right course of action? I welcome the public debate. When you bring us some ideas, then getting 5 people to agree, and then going to the public, getting their input. We want to hear from the residents. We want to hear from
Yes.
from everybody. I think that we should have a public debate about this for sure. So,
I agree.
okay.
Right.
I think that with that consensus on that direction, I think that this meeting. Do we need anything, Heidi? Need anything from us? Okay, so
Well,
then.
Mayor, I have a question. Sylvia, in your experience, projects like this, how far down the road do we see benefits from this? How many years?
Well, I think it depends on some other factors as well. We can do certain things with the zoning, right? We can break down some of those barriers, and we can streamline, the burden. But we can also, for example, in parallel with that, do a branding exercise and go out there and actually target, and bring some interest. And one of the things that Lambert does is a lot of that sort of targeted work with potential partners that the city could be, looking at having projects come in that are of a certain type, of a certain quality. So if we don't do any of that, it could be, I don't know, it could be 5, 10 years perhaps that you see, some of the projects come in and perhaps come to fruition. I mean, I know that the projects that we have approved in the last 4 or 5 years, one of them took 2 years. They're coming now for permit for the first time. And the other one, we don't even know. It was approved, but we don't even know when, right? So I think that some of that is because there might be some hesitation to move forward when there might be an opportunity for change. But we can be very targeted about actually going out there and eliciting that interest to help promote what we do on the regulatory side. So I guess what I'm saying is that even though this is supposed to be an exercise in looking at regulatory barriers and trying to break them down, there might be other recommendations that we make to you that perhaps you can take and see where you want to run with them in parallel with this to be more aggressive.
All right. Esteemed city manager, anything to add?
Just to your point, Councilman Perez Crespo, Fabian, we do have already some property owners in place, and I think the name Oliva was mentioned. He has already some properties out there, and from my understanding, he's kind of waiting. So it's all, it could be quicker, it could take a little longer. Some of the current property owners probably have no interest in that to sell. So who knows?
All right. Well, that being said, thank you everyone for coming out. This city council workshop is adjourned at 7:46. Thank you.